we've been fortunate to have procured the services of Link Digital along with a couple of other vendors to help us change our system. So we had I'm jumping ahead. So I'm Miles Duncan. I'm the manager for geoscience information here at the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. We started the journey. Oh, sorry, hang on. Lost my controls. Where are they? There they are. So I'll probably slip in and out of a couple of definitions at the start. With New Zealand Petroleum and Minerals, you'll hear me say that, or we'll talk what you heard Stephen earlier say, ERM, which is the Energy and Resource Markets. Energy and Resource Markets is our group within MB, within the ministry, but previously it was New Zealand Petroleum and Minerals, so we maintained that as a brand name because all of the people external to the ministry were far more familiar with that. So sorry if I use NZPNM or ERM interchangeably. We're the regulator for the petroleum and minerals in New Zealand. We of course, like everyone else, have our own act. But under the Act, it's a requirement that explorers or miners provide us with the information that they are required to collect under the conditions of their permits. So that's led us to have a very large amounts of data. I think probably internationally it's not colossal, but for us, we wrestle with the size of it. Particularly, we've got another project running at the moment looking at that collection of field seismic data, the 2.4 petabytes, sorry, of information. It's all sitting on magnetic tape, but so that's going to be exposed via the system that you're going to have a look at later, not the actual data, but the metadata about it. We've also got the mine plans management system. We had a mines disaster here 2012, I think it was. Quite a few people lost their lives. Out of that was a Royal Commission, and the finding was that the mine plans were scattered across the country. So we've improved that and have a joint relationship with the government agency that's responsible for workplace safety. We also manage the petroleum production reserves and resources database. Fortunately, my team doesn't have to worry about that side of it because that's far more complex than we're capable of dealing with. There's a public good component of the Crown Minerals Act under Section 90, the idea being that we release this information back when it becomes appropriate to do so, so that you're not getting people doing the same thing again and again. If someone surrenders a permit, you don't want the next people that have picked it up to then go through the same work program. So the way that we've released, very quickly, we've also got a few physical collections. We're responsible for the National Archive, for the core archive, just north of Wellington. And we've also got a little repository of mine plans that we inherited from a previous government agency down on the west coast of the South Island. So obviously a lot of our information is very transactional, it's spatial as well. The whole point is to make us able to service the teams that are responsible for managing the permits and the permitting system. We have a suite of online services. The one that we'll be talking about today is the second little icon there in the blue. I always think of them as open shark's mouths, but I don't know why they always make me think of that. But there is also an online permitting system that is at this stage is separate from the two separate. We do have thoughts about whether we can align those later. So what was our problem? So we were obviously quite data rich, but we were really struggling with providing access to the information to the right people at the right time. The previous system was on its last legs. Quite a large components, important components of it were end of life in the products, the software life cycle. And the world had moved on. There was far better ways to provide the information out to the public. in particular, the internal users were also saying that they were struggling to find the information they needed. So how did we address that? We went to market like all good government departments and sourced with a couple of drivers. One was that we wanted to go open source. That was a prior a precondition, and the second was to wanting to get into the cloud and give us the ability to leverage the sort of the scale or the power of cloud for the improved search responsiveness and hopefully lower storage costs. A big focus was to make it fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So we've tried to adhere to that philosophy as much as possible in the project. And quite early in the piece, before we actually did the RFP, the request for proposals from the market, was we started looking around and talking to people that had gone down this track. And the one that really resonated with us was from the good people in the Queensland Geological Survey. It really felt there was a good alignment with what we needed to do with what they were busy doing for their open data portal. For there's a little picture there. It's incredibly hard for you to read probably. Screen grab of the public version of the catalog. We handle user management via a centralized management login control via RealMe, which is another government department handles that. We don't have to stand anything up. We just subscribe to it, so that should there be the very unlikely event of an improper data release, we know who we need to record who has accessed what within our system, in the public system, so that we can get the information back from them should we need to. Otherwise, everything is openly accessible. We just need to know who's seen it in case. So a quick overview of the components of what we put in, and I say we, it definitely wasn't us. It was the consortium of Theta, who was a New Zealand company that looked after all the Azure cloud infrastructure. They're based here in Wellington, the capital of New Zealand. Link Digital were the key part of the consortium, and it was where we had heard already good things of you guys from the GSQ. They're responsible for the CCAN, Solar, and Jira integration. We'll get onto the Jira in a sec. And another New Zealand organisation called ABLI. They're based in a city in the South Island of New Zealand, and they were responsible for the FME installation and also developing a ArcGIS enterprise map and app. We already had FME, and we already had ArcGIS. It was just a matter of getting it integrated and working smoothly with the rest of the components. I'm not going to bother reading my notes about what CCAN is, because I think probably there's a lot of people that know a whole lot more about it than me. But for those that don't know, and again, not a technical person, but Solar is the open source search platform that's incorporated into the background. Any details on any of these things, Rupak, I'm sure, will jump in at the appropriate time and answer questions and save me embarrassment.
So Miles, only one thing, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yep.
So that's to everybody, like this is our first, when I say first hour, means Link Digital Azure, kind of platform, where we just, fully develop everything inside the Azure platform and then, scale it and then deliver it on the production. So yes, just wanted to highlight, because that can increase our capacity from AWS to transitioning to Azure. So yes.
Yeah, no, good point. I should have highlighted that. Thanks, Rupak. It was one of the things that needed to be worked through in the project, was the fact that Link Digital had everything in AWS, and we had a government-wide decision to stick with Azure. So again, thank you for that. I don't think I need those. So as part of the development and the discovery phase, and then during the implementation, we worked out that we would need 3 workflows, and we decided that, sorry, get rid of the pop-up message. We decided that we would use Jira. There's quite an early conversation that Link Digital helped steer us with to handle the workflow, because we already had Jira. That we would another part of the organization was using it as a ticketing system, and then so we were just leveraging another existing installation. We didn't have to go from scratch on that. So the three workflows were the lodge and load, the publication and release, and the updates. We treat the publication and release and the updates, we use the same board, but you'll see that in a sec. Probably the key, one bullet point there that's really important is the fact that the status is controlled by Jira and mirrored in CCAN. So there's, again, Rupak will explain, but when we get there, but there's a cron job that runs to keep Jira and CCAN in sync with its status. And by status, I mean where we are in the workflow, and then later its publication status. Just out of interest, there was, again, lessons learned in the project. We have 5 environments for the development of the CCAN. We have 3 environments for the GIS, and then I think 2 environments for the Jira. So we ended up, there was quite a bit of fiddling about to try and work across those different size or numbers of environments. So I'd really, I think with the benefit of hindsight, it would be worth aligning all the environments up, but we didn't have that luxury during the project, so we made do. So we're gonna, we were asked to focus in on the Jira side of it for this presentation. So we will jump into now. He says, not getting a response. There's an awful lot on these slides. I'm not expecting everyone will take it in, but you get the basic understanding of the workflows that we developed between CCAN and Jira, whereby when we first, because we will receive a data submission, it can be reports, it can be seismic data, it can be assay results from drilling, anything that the explorers or the miners have done, they supply to us. It can be in forms of spreadsheets. We can have 3D software outputs supplied to us. It can be all sorts of things. So we talk about a submission just to try and encapsulate all of that. So when we get we receive, and I'm going to gloss over, there's a bunch of other workflows that happen outside of this integration, but when we receive things, it can either be via email, it can be a thumb drive or a physical hard drive, or thanks to this new system, we can now start to receive it via cloud. However it comes to us, we create a Jira ticket and then start the ball rolling through our, so I'm just going to change screen through the board. Let me just pull this over here, sorry. So this, apologies for the mess in this. This is the sandbox, so it's the UAT version. So there's a whole lot of mess in here, but basically in a nutshell, the workflow is to shift tickets from when we receive it into the different states, and these are reflected back into no, at the stage, sorry, at this stage they're not reflected in CCAN because we haven't lodged it into CCAN. But where we would go through our QA/QC process, which is the earlier columns, eventually it will come to this column, publish to internal asset register. So I will, sorry, just get rid of this one back out. And I've lost all of you guys. There you go.
So as Miles is doing everything, sorry, Miles to interrupt you, as Miles is doing the screen transition. So all this entire thing is happening. This all integration functionality is happening inside the portal called IAR, the internal portal. Until unless it will go to public and go for public portal altogether. So yes, as you can see, the IAR is registered over here. That's a second version is running on top of it.
So this is the IAR. Just harking back to a comment I said earlier about the 5
environments.
Thanks, Rupak. And for those that were on the call early enough, my assumption, I'm the one of the sysadmins for the production environment, but I just assumed I was also for the UAT environment that you're looking at here, the user acceptance testing, which I'm not, and unfortunately that's going to impact a little bit later in the demonstration, because I won't be able to show you the full publication and live in action, but we've worked around it. I'm assuming people are pretty familiar with CCAN. Obviously, it's all skinned up to look a little bit more like the MB branding, but the different approaches to getting at the information across here. This is UAT, so there's things that don't show in the production environment. And the map, I'll just very quickly drag this one over. We took 2 approaches to the spatial aspect. One is the built-in spatial filter within CCAN that you're probably familiar with, of just drag a box over an area to get a spatial return of the information that's within that box. And the second was a more interactive map that we can, you can turn data on and off, and themed it for different different topics, so that if you're in the petroleum team, or you're interested in petroleum information, you just click on the petroleum one and it loads up and turns on the layers for you, rather than going, oh, I think I need reports, blah blah blah. So it's just a quicker way of getting through those things, but we're not going to spend too much time on the map. The great thing about the map is that there is integration between CCAN and the map. So when you've found something in the map that you want to see, there's a show in catalog button, and it will jump you back into CCAN and have those data sets selected for you, and vice versa. If you find something in CCAN,
Yeah,
going
so
for a live demo. Go on, Rupak.
yeah, so you rightly mentioned that one, Miles. So yes, this is bidirectional flow from CCAN to web map, and web map to CCAN. So wherever there is a proper lat long is there, you can have those replicated properly in ArcGIS or web map, and then other way also around. If you have the proper data in ArcGIS or web map, you can have that, and you can connect to CCAN, to specific data set.
It's very risky showing you this in UAT, because we've messed around with those data sets so many times that potentially this isn't going to jump to the right data set. We'll just see if it does come in. And if it doesn't zoom to a data set, it's not related. No, it doesn't. No. So randomly clicking isn't the right way to do it with a demo. But anyhow, so as Rupak pointed out, that's bidirectional between. Everyone knows about, I'm assuming you're all familiar with the faceted search, so I won't bother talking about those sides of things either. So back to the workflow. Get people back on screen. So it was basically rather poorly rattled through the idea of shifting it through our QA/QC process, and the ticket updating the status, and that's reflecting in Jira. And eventually we will get to the point where we will trigger an FME. Is people familiar with FME, the feature manipulation engine, where we have a workbench that runs in the background. We don't have to do it. We fill out an online form with all the appropriate metadata, and then that interacts with CCAN to do the publishing into the internal asset register. So Rupak, any clues as to how that works?
Yes, so the way it is built up, FME is basically using all the CCAN API, which is basically specifically built up for FME only. And those API is like package create, resource create, resource update, all those things, and which is modified based on FME. There are some specific metadata, which is basically FME can ingest or FME can update accordingly. And then once that has been done by FME, there is a schedule job is running to get the data and then populate it back inside the CCAN. So yes, that is also one of the schedule is running to get the data. And there is one more thing is, yeah, Miles, go ahead.
No, you go.
So there is one more thing is specifically this project has a lot of resource. When I say resource, means resource files. So yeah, the cron job can take time to populate the resource inside CCAN, and that time maybe a couple of hours. So there is a gradual process like threading kind of, where the resource for a specific data set can take time to manually or automatically put that and then display accordingly inside CCAN. So yes, there are some thread logic is also there inside the processing of worker. Go ahead, Miles.
And the other advantage, I mean, that where FME really comes into its own for us is that when we have a submission that is, say, a minerals report, and they've done a drilling campaign and there are hundreds of drill holes, if it wasn't for FME, we would have to, if we were loading through the CCAN interface, we would need to load each of those drill holes as an individual thing, so that within the FME load process, we've got the ability to do a load sheet in CSV that then runs away and does all of that loading automatically in the background, so we don't have to worry about that. So someone's got their hand up by the look of it.
Yes, I think
Yeah,
so.
sorry. Yeah, sorry, Miles, it's me.
Yep.
Pride Wellingtonian. I've just got a question for you. I just want to know the relationship between the CCAN and the internal asset register, like that little workflow there. How does that work? As in, what's the purpose?
So internal asset register is like a CCAN instance. That's the way the portal is. The name of the portal is internal asset register, but it's a CCAN instance. And whenever FME is basically putting the data inside CCAN, that is what the communication is happening. FME can interact with CCAN. FME can also interact with ArcGIS to make sure all GeoJSON related information can be updated accordingly to ArcGIS along with CCAN, so that CCAN can update accordingly to ArcGIS based on the communication received from the data. So that's the way it is. So our internal asset register is like a CCAN instance, nothing else.
So,
All right.
sorry, I should have explained. We have the two instances. So there's the internal asset register, and then there's the public service catalog, which is the public facing one. We have a requirement under the Act to make things publicly available, but we also, a lot of it is confidential when it's first provided. The Act has 5 year, well, there's a bunch of circumstances, but in general, it's a 5-year cooling period, so that whoever has supplied the information has a commercial advantage for a fair period of time, and then it's released into the public. There are other circumstances that trigger a release, which again we had to build in. I'm not going to go into this presentation, but we had to build that into the system, the ability to get that triggering, manual triggering. We're very nervous. I should explain, we're very nervous about the concept of anything being automatic. We have had one, was happily before my time, but we've had one inadvertent data release, and apparently it was a very unpleasant situation. Ministers do not like being on the front page of newspaper. We've kept the release mechanisms as manual. Don't want anything automated, just in case someone puts a wrong date in, it triggers with the system and poof, out it goes. So there's always a check before it's released. But I'm sorry.
That's an interesting point you make, Miles, because we were actually considering automating certain data releases through the portal. But all right, thank you for that.
There would be some, I think, that you could automate. We have, say, there's a surrender of a permit or something like that. That's another trigger that says, but you would want to do all of your QA/QC first and then have it trigger an automatic release maybe. But we decided to have everything manual. It was part of the thinking, even if we weren't a bit risk averse ourselves. The cybersecurity team were very twitchy about anything automated. So that was a prerequisite, is that CCAN is not triggered by Jira. It has to be the other way around. Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
That's all right. So that's the ingest workflow, and then the publication workflow is basically the one that we're talking about just then. With CCAN will monitor the dates of there's one of the entered fields is a release date. So it monitors the dates on a I assume a daily basis. What have we got here, Rupert?
Yes, yes,
Yep.
yes, that's right.
And it will generate a ticket in the Jira workflow, so that my team will then, they monitor the Jira workboard. Let me jump to the publication.
So just to let you all know, there are two different Jira board, one for the submission one, the ELL, if you remember correctly, the way Miles was showing, and this one is specifically built up for EPR, which is the publication workflow. So once you have the data set inside IAR, now you are going to publish that inside the external portal. That's what is happening right now.
And the obvious way for us to differentiate, apart from, of course, the name, is the fact that there are a lot more steps in the lodge and load than there are in the publication and release. We tried to make the publication and release as streamlined as we could. When Jira, CCAN detects a release date has come up, it will generate one of these. I don't know how familiar people are with Jira, but it will generate a ticket for it. We'll have the appropriate URL for the data set within CCAN, and then you will start using these going through the different stages within the publication and release board. So you would, when it first comes up, the advisors will have a look at it. They'll do a first check that everything is appropriate for it to be released. There's a whole swag of stuff that they have to go through, and then it gets transferred to a senior. We made the decision that it wasn't fair on a sort of a more junior team member to have them responsible should anything go wrong. So there'll be a second set of eyes. Will review all of exactly the same information again. Depending on how complex these things are, they can take a long time. If there's 100 drill holes, you can imagine that's not a pleasant thing to go through, but it's important to do this correctly. The next step, after the senior is confident that they have, and of course they make notes in the ticket of what they've been doing, the next step is to shift it into ready for publication. And this is where I got caught out with the different systems. So when you change the ticket into the ready for publication state, within CCAN, within the data set itself, you will get this publish button will magically appear. Rupak, do you want to explain
Yes.
how that works?
So again, every time CCAN is basically looking through cron job and like the update is happening, I'm talking about updating inside the Jira status. As soon as there is a ready for publication, it's been done from Jira side, and CCAN got the status by running the cron job, and then that should be ready based on the dates and the status of the Jira, and then make it as a publish ready over here in CCAN. And then it should be ready, and then make that available inside the inside the public portal, which is the external portal, and that can migrate to or rather syndicated to IAR to PSC, or rather public portal.
And then it's literally as simple as just hitting the publish button and letting the magic happen in the background. The reason this is all, you wouldn't normally get these large black boxes. I stole this one out of the live data set, so I had to redact things out of there. Once it has it has published, and it does during the publish, it will update anything in the ArcGIS instance as well. We made a decision, but long before this project, most information is publicly available, because you imagine if you've got a drill rig doing a big offshore drill hole, you have to notify its location. You can't have ships banging into drill rigs. It's a bad look. So effectively, everything is publicly notified beforehand. What isn't is the final depth of the hole, and of course, anything that they found down the hole. So it's really, when we publish, it's almost a duplication, but there is a small addition of additional information that goes into the public data set. The decision was made, these are not, that they're completely separate instances. There's no way, it's a copy basically, that we haven't mirrored one to the other. It's not a subset showing up in the public system. It is a copy, so that there's no way that someone can backdoor information within the internal asset register. The final thing that the system does is shifts the ticket from the Jira ready for publication into the published column. And then there is a series of tasks to be completed by the senior, which isn't in this workflow, but to tidy up behind ourselves, basically.
So once that has been done, it will be published to external portal. And one more thing, just wanted to highlight over here, any ticket is already been published to external portal, and that can be modified again in internal asset registry. And then again, that will follow the similar publication workflow. And one more thing is, whenever the publishing is happening from internal asset registry to external portal, CCAN is interacting with ArcGIS, making sure ArcGIS is up to date with the CCAN changes. So yes, that changes is also happening based on certain metadata, what data has been identified from ArcGIS side. So yeah, that is also
I think
there.
that generated the most excitement in the project when we finally got that working between, you'd make a change in CCAN, and you'd see a fraction of a second later on another screen, you'd see the attributes update in the map, whereas in the past it's been quite a palaver to make that happen. So there was, you could see the GIS geeks having a ball on that one. But so what Rupak was talking about is this last workflow of the update. So if you make any change to any of the metadata or resources associated with a data set, for a data set that has a associated Jira ticket, you will get it jumps back into, it takes it from wherever it was in the workflow, it takes it back to the edit, or to the update column, and you will start the process again, so that we make sure that you can't do all the QA/QC and think, great, that's all good, and then someone makes a little change. We don't want an accidental release based on that little change. We will redo the quality checks on it. But it's trivial to show you that example of that, so I haven't bothered doing any of that. So that's really it. See, Rupak, do you have anything? Have I missed things?
Not really.
Look, don't get me wrong, there's a heap of stuff happening in the background. The FME is a whole box of monkeys that I haven't gone down. During the development, the specialist that was doing the workbench development for CCAN showed us the actual workbench, and it was just a behemoth of a thing running in the background. So I don't pretend to have any idea of those, so stay away from it. But the usability of the system and the public reception that we've had for it has been phenomenal. And so far, the only issues we've had, because we're only a month and a half in, I think, live, since go live, the only issues we've had have been around the Azure infrastructure side of things. We haven't had an issue yet with the system itself. Yeah, so happy to field any questions that people may have.